Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special evening with four wonderful photographers. And our topic this evening, as I think you all know, is photography and AI. My name is Michael Pritchard. I'm the Programs Director at the Royal Photographic Society, and I've been invited by the photography show to host this evening. And I'll be fielding questions from you in the audience a bit later on. But the format for this evening will be that we'll ask our speakers, our photographers, to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their work for around about 5 minutes each or so. And then we're going to pick up on some of the themes around artificial intelligence, AI, who's using it, what they think about it, where it might take photography into the future. And then we'll open up some questions from you, our audience. So that's the plan. As I say, my name is Michael Pritchard. I'm from the Royal Photographic Society. And in fact, we've just released a statement on AI and how it might impact on photography. And I might come back to that a bit later on. But we shall start by going to our photographers this evening. And Brooke, if you'd like to start first and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. I'm really excited to be doing this panel for several reasons. I will get to those in a second. First, my name is Brooke Shaden. I am a conceptual fine art photographer. I do mostly self-portraits, and so my process is me and my camera and a tripod just going out, usually in the woods, wearing very little and taking pictures. And it's good fun, but also my work is based in grief and death and darkness. And so I myself am very bubbly and happy, but my work is quite the opposite at times, although I like to think that there's always beauty in darkness, and that's what my work conveys, hopefully, to others. So my process does not include AI, and so I can't speak to the process of using it. But to summarize my opinions about AI, I feel a bit like Switzerland here, because I find myself just never upset about anything in life. Like, I don't find myself getting angry about AI or excited about it. And I look back to when I began my journey as a photographer, which I never really thought would happen, photography in particular. But when I began photography, I had an idea. My journey did not begin because I picked up a camera and I enjoyed taking pictures, and then that morphed into something else. My journey began with an idea where I picked up a camera and was able to create what I wanted to create through that tool. And that was really exciting to me, and I love that process. So I began photography with this in mind, that the idea is first, and do whatever you want to do to create that idea. Like, that is the most important thing to me. If I were to come into the scene right now saying, I have an idea, how can I create that? Maybe I would have picked up AI. As it is, I love the process. I mean, for me, I don't call myself a photographer in particular. I am an artist first and foremost, which probably sounds like really crappy of me to say like that. I don't mean it like, oh, I'm an artist. Like, I don't mean that, but I mean that, the ideas are first, the craft is first to me. And so what I love is to be outside in nature with my camera. I love to take self-portraits. I love to be the character and the director and the person lighting it, and just really get down and dirty with the process. And so from that frame of view, I just love the craft, whatever it is, with the idea first and foremost. So those are my quick thoughts on it.
That's great. Thank you, Brooke. Panikos, can I come to you next to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work?
Sure. My name is Panikos Hajistilly. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know. Everyone knows me as Pani. I started off my career in photography actually on the other side of the camera. I used to repair cameras for a living for a long time. I worked for Canon, Olympus, and Nikon. I supervised the workshop at Nikon 15 years, just as it started to go into digital. But then I got a bit fed up with that. I wanted to open a studio, so I opened a studio. Built it up over a few years. We had 6 photographers, 18 staff in total. Turned into a bit of a machine. I wasn't enjoying my photography because I hardly was doing any. So I went out on my own. And that's when I started taking pictures, meaningful pictures of people, families, children, babies, pets, to create something for them to cherish for the years to come. And as I've been doing it for now the best part of 13, 14 years, I'm getting so many repeat clients, people coming back to me to update their pictures. And I'm seeing these little babies that I photographed 10 years ago, and they're big human beings that talk. It's unbelievable, And it's actually sometimes quite emotional for me to see them grow up. But, they come back and they've got their phones, and they show me the photos of their babies when they were, 10 years ago. And, they just love them and cherish them. And that's what I like to do. I like to create a little bit of happiness for people and have something for them to have forever. With regard to AI, obviously there are many aspects to AI. We're talking today about AI in photography. And now I love AI as an art form. I think some of the imagery that's been created recently has been absolutely incredible, like show-stopping stuff. The colors are amazing. The ideas are just out of this world. But we have an issue here with regard to, because I've won a few awards in my photographic career since I've been on my own, and I've got the privilege of judging for a few of the organizations here in the UK. We've seen that a few people are trying to mix AI with their photography to enhance their imagery, to try and get a higher score or to win competitions. And that's where it's creating a little bit of an issue, because sometimes, in fact, very often, it's almost impossible to detect. So that's the issue that we face for photographic competitions. However, when it comes to AI within the technology that we use, I think that's amazing. The fact that you can add a little bit of space to pictures and, do things that would take an age before, and you can do it with a click of a button and just wait for a few seconds. I mean, that is incredible. And that's a real help. Other software that can help to speed up workflows, that's also, a real bonus to us. So I like certain aspects of AI, but I also am wary of what it can do in the future for certain aspects of photography. I don't think it will affect my type of photography, speaking as an individual, that much, because I'm taking pictures of people's, children, pets. They have to be of the moment. We have to get the expressions. We have to get them together. We have to try and capture that emotion. I don't think you can do that with AI. But I do worry for the commercial side of photography, because I've already heard that certain companies, big companies, are actually dropping their photography departments and just embracing AI. Now, that's an evolution thing, for creating graphical imagery is an amazing thing. And, using AI is incredible, with the prompts, etc. But with regard to, purely selfishly talking about my own work, I don't think it will impact me so much, but I do think there are certain aspects of photography that will be hugely impacted by the developments within AI.
Right, we're going to come back to some of those points. Thank you, Panikos. Corrine, I'll come to you next, and I'll come to you finally, Calvin, because I know a little bit about what we were talking about earlier, so I think we'll end with you. Corrine, could you tell us a little bit about your photography, what you're doing and how you're doing it, because you're almost taking photography back to its origins.
Yeah, I've gone back a few years. So I do wet plate collodion photography. I teach it as well. And I have various different projects in hand that I'm working on, such as a project on late diagnosed neurodivergence. And it's going really, really well. I also do brand photography, so photography for businesses, entrepreneurs as well. That's how I make my main income. And from there, sort of my concerns with AI is people replacing brand images with AI. Having said that, I have used things like narrative to cull my images because it makes my workflow so much quicker in that sense. And I do go through and double check to make sure that I am happy with the ones that they've culled. So yeah, I'm in sort of two minds with AI, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on it. So
Great.
That's me.
Thank you. Thanks, Corrine. And then Calvin, again, would you talk a little bit about your career to date and particularly what you're doing at the moment, which you were enthralling us with earlier on, actually?
Hi, my name is Calvin. I'm a London-based fashion photographer and a fashion filmmaker. Most of my work is taking that contemporary approach and working with tech, working with what's available and what's trending. So most of the work, I think, like my work, I used to do a lot of like editorial shoots and brand campaigns and stuff. I still shoot for a lot of brands and brand campaigns and work with fashion filmmaking. I still shoot odd Pentax 6.7 stuff, and but the whole approach is different. I think we need to first of all take away my thoughts of AI is I taken away the monetary value of how much we can earn or how much we don't want to earn from it. But I'm looking at the future growth and scaling and the whole industry wise. So how do you scale an industry? How do you grow industry? In that way, I think I don't think we are going to lose jobs. I think we will upgrade jobs with AI. I think the authenticity we need to look at the modern version of contemporary authenticity. I think we need to talk about licensing. I think we need to talk about ethics again, because we still works with. What's the difference of me going to a library and looking at Newton's book and taking some memory of those pictures and coming and making something and getting a machine to do it, and it's still referencing. But we're still judging from that back in a day authenticity rules, and those rules doesn't apply. So if you judge from that the rule book of like, okay, these are the rules, this is the authenticity, these are the licensing, this is the privacy, and then if you start judging from that, of course, then you look AI and all the stuff we are doing is quite wrong. And also there's like a different AI models, right? So we'll talk about it. I'm sure we talk about in depth, like what is generative AI and the Neuralink and how does the text to image works and what are the parameters, how does the whole workflow works, and why is it disturbing? I think like classic AI, everyone use cloning tool, right, on Photoshop, so that's AI itself, right? But the game is changed now, because now is ML, which is machine learning to machine learning making decision, rather than it's taking away from human control. So I think that's the bit I am working at the moment and trying to upgrade my skill set, as well as a lot of R&D stuff. But we always talking about how do we use ChatGPT versus DALL-E versus Cinema 4D and shoot a concept, or then rescan it, or then we blend it with a Mid-Journey, and where does it lead us? And I think like it's just a big open source, and it leads us to and there's a cons as well, especially for newcomers, and we'll talk about it. I'm sure we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Calvin. That's a really good introduction, and we'll come back to some of those points. So we've heard from our panel, and I think I'm taking away that there's a breadth of knowledge there. I mean, clearly Calvin is very much in the AI world, and perhaps one or two of our other panelists are not so far down that road, or perhaps don't even want to embrace it. So we'll pick up with that in just a moment. In terms of our audience's questions, if you can use the Q&A function in Zoom, then we will pick up with some of those, perhaps along the way, perhaps towards the end of the formal conversation between our panels. But I wanted to just pick up on a couple of questions arising out of some of the things that our panelists have said. And Brooke, if I could come back to you, the first thing I noted was that that you said basically words to the effect that you weren't sure about AI, and I wondered just if you could talk a little bit about what you know about AI, and whether you think you know enough about what it can do, and what we've heard from Calvin, perhaps.
Yeah, I have been pretty intentionally not delved into AI very deeply, and not because I feel any distaste for it even. I just, the best metaphor I can use is when I started using Photoshop. I'm self-taught in Photoshop, and I remember for years, like years, I just would not learn how to use a layer mask. I hated the idea. I didn't get it. And so I used the eraser tool on everything. Like I was compositing with basically the move tool, the lasso tool, the eraser tool. That's it. And it was destructive, and like that's a whole other conversation, right? But the fact was that I just loved doing it. Like I loved the process. I was excited. I wasn't excited to learn a new skill at that time, and so I didn't. And that's kind of how it feels right now, where I don't feel like morally opposed to using AI per se. And especially when I think about I do a lot of work with youth who have been trafficked, and I do a lot of self-expression workshops in that realm. And so I think about self-expression as a tool, especially for young people, and how this is the perfect platform to allow that kind of self-expression and to allow people to express their ideas without that barrier of having to learn something new, which I think is fabulous. So for me personally, I'm not excited about it. I love going out and getting all of my shots. I've never used stock images, for example, for any composites that I've done. And so that feels very similar to me, where I could go pay for stock imagery. I could, have those amazing cliffs in Ireland that I can't get to or something like that if I wanted, but I'd rather wait for 5, 10, 15 years in the future when I can go have that experience myself. And I think that I'm coming at it from a very experiential point of view, where I have the idea, I have the experience, I want to marry those two things. And I'm not that interested in asking a computer to do it for me. Morals aside, like whatever your stance is on it that way, I just want to do it. I just love doing it. So that's kind of where I stand.
Then Panikos, I think the point I picked up from your introduction was very much about comparing photography to art, and it raised the question for me then, is AI even photography for you?
Well, I think that's the question that's on everybody's mind. It's a visual medium. It's a visual medium that can't be ignored, and what we see is very, very powerful. Images have changed the course of history. That's how powerful imagery is. So whether we're using images that we take through a lens, creating a physical image either on an electronic surface or on film or a collodion or whatever, or whether we are creating it with a pen or a hammer and chisel or whatever, it's a visual medium. And that's where the blurring occurs, because people are able to word prompt imagery and create images that look stunning. And they can then say it's photography, but really photography, I'm Greek. I know the root meaning of the word, writing with light, that's what it's about. So really there is a blurring of the lines on that score. I have nothing against AI. It's just that when people are using AI to manufacture something that other people will consider to be photography, that's when it becomes a little bit dangerous. It becomes a problem for us as photographers and photographic judges, because some people will see images online and they say, "Oh, this is amazing," and I do the same thing. I look at some of these imagery, and it's absolutely fantastic. The colors, everything about it is amazing, but you can't create that with a camera. It's very, very difficult. However, I'll give you an example. I went to the zoo with my family a few weeks ago, and although I don't actually like zoos, I don't like seeing animals caged up. I took some photos, fences in the background. I put the image into AI, removed the background. I just put a word prompt. I put Tanzania. And this elephant that I took a photo of was like in Tanzania, and you could not tell. Now, could I enter that picture into a competition? No. But would I like it for myself? Yeah, absolutely fine. So that's where we have a few difficulties. When it comes to editing pictures, within Photoshop, for example, which has got its own form of AI in the beta version that's running currently, it really does amazing things. It really helps my workflow out. But it's helping my images that I've created. So it's extending a background, it's tidying things up, it's adding a little bit of hair where there wasn't any. It's that type of thing. I deem that to be okay. But some people may not.
I think this is something that's exercising all of the professional bodies at the moment, the RPS certainly, and bodies like FIAP and the PSA and the PAGB. There's this distinction between using AI to automate workflow, and I'll come to you there, Corrine, because you mentioned workflow earlier, but also then the second tranche of this is the generative side, which is where I think which is more problematic. And Corrine, you mentioned the workflow word, and you also mentioned that you had concerns. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and how, whether you see a distinction between that workflow, the automation of processing, which again Calvin spoke about, as opposed to generating something that has never existed in the real world.
I think that it helps me with my workflow, as in when I'm culling my images, it saves me a lot of time in that sense. But using like generative, I've not done that in my photos anyway. I know with Adobe that you can't use that commercially anyway. So I just haven't really played with that. I have played with like removing noise from the background and stuff like that, but not in a commercial sense. And my concern is it taking elements from other photographers like work, and is it going to cause controversy in that sense? I get you get inspiration from other photographers and it's a similar thing, but is it actively taking elements from other people's work? That's my question.
Yeah, and there's a mess. I mean, in fact, Calvin, you mentioned the ethics word and licensing, and obviously AI has massive implications around the photographer's rights and recompense in terms of how some of that machine learning is undertaken. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the ethics side? And I'll probably throw the question out more widely as well to some of you. But Calvin, please come in.
I think the issue is we're going through a generational issue, first of all. So the whole generational issue is like we are so hung up with like what's ours, what's mine, versus the ROI, which is return of investment, and how much money I can make from it. Right? That's the issue. And the issue is like monetary gain. How much am I going to lose of it? We are not looking as holistically like how much the technology and this how scalable this whole project of AI versus creativity, right? Because like most of the people, the frustrations and the questions are: am I going to lose jobs? Am I going to lose income? Am I going to lose this? Am I going to lose this? And are we going to lose this? And I'm coming from a obviously commercial world, and obviously we don't have many commercial photographers entering into like competitions and etc. So but then again, those rules were made in I think they are relevant, but I'm not sure whether they are relevant for future, because some of the rules were made because the technology and the process is changing. The issue is like if you look at like, because we got at the moment we have ChatGPT, everyone knows about ChatGPT, and then you have DALL-E, you have Brad, and you have Midjourney. Those are the sort of the big boys you have. Like you look at like Google, which is like it's LaMDA, which is language model for dialogue application, which is text to text based generation. So you look at how you make a workflow, right? Before you obviously where so if I go to ChatGPT and if I say to, as example, can you create this for this brand campaign, this sort of a narrative, this sort of a scenario, and then I modify that one. I take one from the ChatGPT, then I rewrite it, then I run it through, say, Midjourney. Then I compare that with some of the color palettes I may have with me. So I think then I'm also working with it. So I think that's where I think the licensing and authenticity law has to be more contemporary and relevant for today, because I don't think it's just like we are taking bit from that, and making an image from someone, because how the technology and the open AI works. And obviously we know about big data and how they collect the data, how it funnel the data, and how the data made, and what is a picture. So I think as a licensing wise, as well as I think as a authenticity wise, if we are talking about current rules, I think it's a huge generational issues. But it was someone is obviously 3 years old, going to be 2025, who's going to work, who's going to grow up with Java and Python, and also with like coding with that's photography for them. It's gonna be what we see now, and once our generations is not here, and I think they will rewrite the authenticity and licensing. And I think we need to also take a more open approach to a licensing, and because we are still within this society that we start licensing, start getting patent for stuff because other people can't use it. And so I like the ideology of SpaceX and Elon, because everything is open source, right? So you can take it, you can modify it, you can create something out of it. I think we need to sort of think in holistically bigger, rather than just saying like, hey, this belongs to me, I would like to license it. Because end of the day, it's not just creating money out of a product. It matters. Obviously, it matters for an individual purpose, for paying the bills and stuff. But if you look at the industry as a holistically, we need to scale it. We need to push it. And then in that respect, I think we need to relook at the licensing laws and privacy laws and open it so we can scale it. Everyone can just really work in these images and make something really, really crazy and really, really mind-blowing stuff, and without having about someone's pointing fingers up.
And is that a view that the rest of you share? Because I think there's some quite strong. That's quite a strong view at the moment, Calvin. I think I think a lot of people are still feeling their way, and clearly you've made that leap yourself in terms of how you're viewing AI. Is that, how do other people feel about that, and that particularly that issue around rights and use of images?
If I could chip in there, this is obviously something that's going to be debated time and again. But at this stage in time, in this part of the history of our, generation, we have to understand a couple of things about how AI is working. It doesn't actually look at one of my images, or maybe one of Brooke's images, or one of Corrine's images, and blend them together. It analyzes the image, turns it into code, and then obviously has names associated with that code. So when people prompt a particular style, for argument's sake, Picasso or whoever, it will use code to generate that imagery. So it then becomes really difficult for whoever is saying, oh, that's a bit of my photo in there. It becomes very difficult for them to say it's actually not just yours, it's his and hers and theirs, and from way back when. Anything that's on the internet has been scoured and it's been turned into code, and that code is generating imagery. Obviously, we have issues like what happened with Getty recently, where it's seen the images on the internet on Getty's library, and it's actually copied over badly the logo at the bottom of the picture. So it's clear where it's come from, but that's been embedded into the code. So it does, it does create a really, really big issue. And this is something that's going to be taken, exactly as Calvin said, this is a monetary thing. Everybody's in it to make some money somewhere. And it's the big corporations that are investing in it, generating it, creating it, and they're the ones that are going to want recompense. I think us as photographers, for example, if somebody creates something out of Brooke's work, Brooke isn't going to see a penny of that, and nor mine, nor anybody else's. The big corporations are going to, as was said before, create a guideline, create a rule, a law, and compensate certain organizations, and that'll be the end of it. And then the next generation is going to accept it as it is, and we move on. But I do feel for people who are going to lose recognition for their work. I do think that's quite unfair, and in a way that we're being beaten for the lovely work that we put out on the internet. But that's life.
I want to piggyback on that, if I may. I think about how for my whole career, I probably every single day I get a message from somebody saying, I saw somebody copied your picture. I saw somebody is taking your idea. Like almost every single day for the last 14 years, I have received messages like this. And I feel I've always just told those people, that's okay. Like put it out of your mind. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. And I know that that's not a super popular position to take on this, because obviously we as photographers, if somebody were to copy our work, it's natural to feel very protective over that work that you've made. I rather have always felt not like, you should be flattered per se if somebody copies you, but I do feel that you should be glad to a degree that somebody has found their in to be able to make something out of whatever is in their mind, and it can be a stepping stone. And so I've never ever found myself upset about people copying what I do unless it's done maliciously. And I think that's where it's complicated here, because I don't think it really isn't done maliciously in my opinion. But you can't really tell. And it gets tough when you're dealing with big companies or big sales that have come from something generated from your work. Of course, that's a different conversation. But I think 99% of what is being sampled feels just like all those people telling me, hey, this person copied your work. So what? Let them copy my work. I don't really care. Like my view has always been that I have complete confidence in my abilities as an idea generator, as an artist, and that no matter what form that takes, I have to believe that I am the source and that I can continue to be the source. And I find that it's good peace of mind. And I don't go to bed worrying about who's doing what with my images, because I'm still here, the original creator, who's going to wake up the next morning and do something else. And I love that line of thinking.
So I think that picks up with a really nice question, actually, from one of our audience, which I'm going to throw over to all four of you. And the point that our audience members saying is that the whole AI scaremongering reminds him or her of when film photographers kicked off about digital photography. Do you think that's is that a reasonable comparison, or do you think this is actually a whole paradigm shift, or is it simply just that continuity of photographer's evolution?
I think that with the digital and film thing, like in my opinion, it was more about not thinking about what you're taking as much with a digital camera, and being able to manipulate it more with digital. But at the same time, you can manipulate things with analog. I do that all the time. That's what I do. That's how I create. So I think, from what I remember, that was the main argument with that.
Yeah. And Panikos, where do you think this is? Is it simply an evolution of photography, or is this at a whole step change?
No, I think it's an evolution of art. if we go back thousands of years ago when people were drawing on caves, and then we had, more modern forms of painting in the Renaissance, and we come forward and, different techniques we used, etc., etc. This is a new art form. It's an art form that's photorealistic, but it's not photography. I think the difference between what happened with film and digital, all that happened was the medium on which the image was created changed. It went from silver halides to a photo sensor. And I was at Nikon at the time of the changeover with the D1, the D1X. In fact, from even before that, there were certain things that were happening digitally that were very, very interesting. We haven't got time for that now, but that's a completely different story, in my opinion, because we were still taking images, we were still lighting the images, we were still posing the people, or capturing a sports event, or creating imagery with light on a medium. Whereas now with AI, we are creating photorealistic imagery, but without putting light through a lens to focus on a surface. And that's the difference. It's an evolution of art. So people can really allow their imagination to explode by using AI. But it's not creating an image, lighting a person, and putting it to some sort of surface for recording.
Corrine or Brooke, any other comments on that? Because I'm going to bring in some other questions from the audience.
I think it's interesting what Pani said. I think obviously in my take, it's made from film to a light sensor. I think now it's made in a chip, right? So that's the evolution. So it made on a film, it was on a light sensor. Now it's on a M1 Bionic processor. Or in an M1 processor, or whatever the processor you want, an Intel processor. I think people get a little bit scared about AI. I think let me share like my workflow. We can shoot a model or a person, and we can extract the model, or we can shoot it on a green screen, or we don't have to shoot on a green screen anymore because we can extract it easily. And then you can build the set with the 4D cinema, and you can put the person into the 4D cinema. Then we can light it with like whether it's a virtual lights from the on the thing, or we can use now we use I don't know whether you've seen completely 360 or 180 LED screens that we use, and we use the complete, which is we build the whole set and we put the model, and we obviously shoot. We don't have to go to Africa, we don't have to go to Sri Lanka or to Porto to shoot, but then we still use array lights and stuff to color match it and light and stuff. So that's a hybrid sort of environment. We are using obviously generative AI to work with creating the set. Is almost like a set design, and then obviously we may obviously shoot the shot, and then we will get like 3 different shots, and we'll put it to Midjourney and ask them to blend it and do some other stuff with it, and then we'll think like, okay, you know what, that's not something we haven't thought about it. Then let's go and maybe reshot that, and maybe or maybe we'll use this picture. So I think the danger is like people thinking the AI is just a monster that's gonna take your jobs away, or it's not gonna call photography. If you're an AI person, you're not a photographer. You're some sort of a digital content creator, and all sorts of. So I think you need to sort of work with the technology and start using like Cinema 4D, and you use like Blender, you use like DALL-E, and also like dive into it, and like there's a pros and cons on anything, but start using it with your workflow and create a workflow within. And I think that's where you're going to get your USP. That's going to make you a much better photographer and a filmmaker, And that's where I think the value comes as well, and people can see your work, and then you get hired for do like a really, really cool projects and cool stuff. I think that's my take.
Yeah. We've got a question here, which actually I think Corrine and perhaps Panikos again, if you'd like to maybe initially respond to that, and anyone else. But it's asking how camera clubs, and I think I'd also extend that out to some of the professional bodies that hold competitions or exhibitions. And Corrine, in terms of your forthcoming students, when you take up your lecturership in the autumn, how do we police AI generated images? Do we need to? Do we rely on people's honesty, or is there something else that we should be doing? Or does it even matter that some of those images that you might be seeing in exhibitions or competitions or from your students are generated by AI?
There's actually a training course that I'm going on in the next couple of months about how to notice if somebody's used AI for like an essay or something like that. So I don't know exactly how to point that out, but there was a photographer.
I think Corrine's internet connection might have just slowed down.
And he entered. Pardon?
Sorry, we lost you for just a moment. So.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
You're back now, yeah.
All right. I'm so sorry. It keeps dropping off here for some reason all of a sudden. He entered a picture in the Sony World Photography Awards, won, but he didn't accept the prize. And the reason he did it was to generate discussions. So I think when it comes to doing stuff like that, it's with the intention in mind, like what is that person's intention? But with regards to policing it, I don't know yet.
Panikos, have you got a view on that through the professional bodies that you work with?
Yeah, the thing is, the professional bodies have put statements out, and I think this applies pretty much globally, that if an image is approaching the top few images, the finalists, first, second, third, before they award the award, they want to be sure that all the elements within the picture were generated by the entrant. We have had a situation in the past where somebody was using imagery that they didn't create, and they lost their prizes, and this happened in different countries. So I think it goes back to the thing that we were saying, that photography is writing with light, not generating an image. The visual impact that we see on the screen, could be equal. You could have a beautiful image created with the AI and a beautiful image created with a camera. And sometimes it's very difficult to tell the difference. So what some organizations are doing is that they're holding back awarding prizes until they're verified by seeing raw files of every element that's been used in the imagery. And I think that's probably the only way of doing it, because as AI improves, we saw the differences between Midjourney 4 and Midjourney 5 and Midjourney 3. It's just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. It's just stunning, and I've been led to believe that that it's possible to create a DNG from an AI generated image. Now, DNG is a digital negative, which can be deemed as a raw file, and it can be upsized, given lots of resolution, to make somebody think that it's been taken with a camera. Now, that becomes very dangerous territory, because you can actually fool anybody, because they are so photorealistic. It's incredible. And that's why I say, listen, there's nothing, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with AI and nothing wrong with AI generated imagery. So we're separating generating the imagery from workflow and the tech side of things, like what Calvin was talking about earlier. This is generating imagery. So we just have to be careful about that, and we have to rely to a degree on people's honesty, but people want to win at all costs, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah. And Brooke, have you any view on this? Does it matter to you? Does it?
I feel very conflicted about this, I would say. it's the type of thing that I mostly exist in the gallery world, really, where I'm making my sales through galleries, and this has not come up with any of my galleries, actually, the topic of AI. And I think that that's probably because they want to make money and they don't really care, to a large degree what's going on out there. That said, I do have, a lot of contacts in the gallery world that are very, very, they care about their beliefs very much, about what they think art is and should be. And so I think that it will come up. I have not experienced it, though, firsthand. And I really, ultimately, I just think that as long as you give an easy category for somebody to identify in, I think that a lot of these problems go away largely, because I think that it's where, let's say you're submitting to a competition and your options are digital art or photography or something like that. Maybe that doesn't quite cover the scope of what you've actually put together. And so I think that the more we simply allow a new category, I think people will take that category and they'll say, yes, this is that. I think about when I make my little write-ups for when I do have exhibitions, it'll say archival pigment print, for example, digital photograph on this paper or whatever. And there's a clear way to delineate what this is. And I think that as long as we do that, I think the conversation will largely dwindle down.
I think this actually maybe speaks to the point that Panikos was making earlier on, that actually what we're doing with AI is creating new artwork in some cases. And I think in the world that you work within and live within, then actually whether it's AI generated doesn't really matter, because the ideas have come from you. It's your work, your interpretation. So actually how you're delivering that is less important perhaps than if you're entering a competition.
I think about this a lot because, and I don't know if anyone else has had this experience where maybe you're scrolling Instagram or something and you see an image and you're like, it makes you stop. And then you see the hashtags and you're like, oh, this is AI. And suddenly your opinion shifts like immediately, whether it's good or bad or whatever. You just have an opinion, right? You see that it's not what you thought it was per se when you first stopped scrolling on that image. And for me, while I don't care what anyone's doing. I mean, I think that's really like what I'm going to keep repeating, but I do have this kind of dip in interest for a second, because to me, part of the joy of looking at art is wondering and thinking about the process that person went through to create that piece of art. And I'm not trying to say that making AI generated imagery is not an art in and of itself. And I do believe that it is. And I do believe that there is a place in the art world for that. But for me, I find that my interest dips a little bit. And I think it's just all about why you're looking at art in the first place. Like why are you drawn to it? What is it about it? Like if I click on Instagram right now and I show you my whatever that page is where you see what they suggest you to look at, whatever that is, if you like, it's all just people painting for me. Like all it is just people making paintings, because I love watching people make art. And so there might come a day where I'm watching people type prompts into a computer, and like maybe that'll be just as cool. And I think that for me, it's a learning curve for me about figuring out what is that art and not being afraid to learn about it and not being afraid to see it as an art form. And I think that all of that goes into this conversation that's very complex, that I'm just trying to hold judgment until I learn more.
I'm just going to stay with you for a moment, Brooke, actually, because there was a question that came in earlier on, I think probably just as soon as you were talking about your work. And it's a really interesting one, actually. It's asking whether you feel that you might be left behind by not embracing AI.
First of all, just as a AI aside, I don't engage in questions like that. Not that I'm not going to answer this. I mean, that's a good question, but in my brain, I don't engage in questions like this, and I never have. There was a time when I had no idea how to work a camera or Photoshop or do any of what I do. And not once did I think, oh, I might not succeed at this because I don't know everything that I have to know. It literally did not cross my mind. And I would like to be studied, because I think this is really odd. Like, I think most people start something new and immediately you start to think, oh, I might, like, there are people better than me. I don't know everything. I need to learn this. I literally never thought that. And I still just don't. And it doesn't occur to me to think like that. And so this question to me is a bit like, I could spend my time wondering if I'm going to get left behind, or I could just go make some art, like, I'd rather just go make the art and not question my process. And it's not that it's not a good question, because it is. And I think that there is that, if I think too long on it, then yeah, I'll like go lay on my couch and just like cry probably. But I don't think there's a point in doing that. I think you just gotta keep true to what you want to create, how you want to create, keep an open mind. I'm not saying I'm not going to embrace AI. I don't honestly know what the future holds for me. I'm just not concerned, and I never have been. And I think if I were, then my career would have probably gone differently.
And that neatly segues into the question I've got for Calvin here, again from one of our audience. And it's really asking much the same question about whether your clients care about whether the work that you produce was 100% AI generated, or do they just see the end result?
I think it's all depends on ROI, right? It's on the bill. So and also it's depends on the consistency and the turnaround time as well. So if you're in a commercial world, the key factor is can you shoot and deliver? Like if you are shooting a London Fashion Week, right, and if you're on a runaway, if you're on the pit, right, and if you can get that shot into a Twitter, and if you can get into a social media then and there, and that's where the money is. So I don't think, but then when you come to the AI, obviously we're looking at AI, if you're looking for a campaign, and if say Midjourney or one of the AI programs comes to a version 10 or 12 in the future and say like, hey, we can pick up, like, let's look at Gucci 2023 autumn winter blue jacket, and can you put that into a this sort of model with this hair color, this and this setting, right? And can you create 4 spreads out of it with this pose, right, and this lighting, and that's done. The purpose of making the advert is to sell a product in a commercial world, right, and or to get advertise a handbag or whatsoever. And if as long as those objectives and KPIs are met, and you have delivered what customer wants. And what customer wants is to customer, like say like a Gucci would go into an agency, and they will brief the agency, and the agency will subcontract a photographer or another agency, and all they wanted to do is like just spin the wheel. So you get the brief, get that, send the draft to the client. Client is happy, and you just send the invoice, get paid. Clients like more than happy, because like now the client has the advert, they can push it in, and they can send it to their influencers, etc., and push it in social media, get their sales, and they can move into the next product or move into the next project. I think that's where it's going. But the issue we have is now we're thinking about everyone can start on that end, but you can't start in that end. That's where the things get complicated. Someone looking at like 20 years old or 18, just coming out from the uni, I'm jumping into the AI. I'm jumping into the AI because I understand the process. I understand the storyboarding, mood boarding. I understand what are the elements. If you understand the elements, you can start manipulating and start shifting things around. Right? I understand how you can mood board. What does it take? What's the inverse square law? I understand, like, okay, that look realistic. That doesn't look realistic. Oh yeah, the light has to be there. And then even to understand, to prompt to AI to make a background in a way with like making it hyper realistic or within the boundaries of still what accepted in a editorial world. But that might change as well. You know, we are still early stage of Decentraland. We are still early stage of like, is the NFT is going to die? Or is it going to come in? Are we going to go into because now the Apple is bringing their virtual AI, the virtual glasses, so then we can see things in a different way, and we'll interact with photographs in a different way, and shopping in a different way, right? And
That takes us
that takes
into a
us to
whole
a
new
different
realm.
world. Yeah,
It does indeed. And Panikos, I'd just like to throw that question back to you in the sense that do your clients, I mean, it may not be so relevant for your work, but do you think your clients would mind if your work is AI generated in part, or is it just about generating that emotional response and it doesn't really matter how that's produced?
Well, that's a really good question, because here in the UK, certainly a lot of people, and I've seen it in different countries as well. A lot of people say, "Oh, this model has been photoshopped and that's been photoshopped and whatever." People have been slimmed down and enhanced and whatever. I've had in the last 13 years, more than that, 20 years that I've had a studio, I've probably had about 8,500 clients. Never have I had somebody say, "Don't Photoshop me." They always say, "Slim me down, make me this, do that, smooth my skin, do." Everybody, without exception. Okay. But I did want to add one other thing with regard to AI. Good AI is incredible, and it's not easy. If you look at creators like Chinthaka and a number of others, their work is absolutely outstanding. It isn't easy to create that sort of work. It takes them hours upon hours, not to create just one image, but to create a body of work that's cohesive, and it looks like it's created at the same place at the same time with the same model. It is an art. It's very, very difficult to create incredibly good AI generated imagery. So, but going back to your question, I do feel that when people come into my studio and they say, because I often ask clients, just send me a screenshot of the kind of images you like. And you know what? The amount of, they're going to come to a studio, and the amount of images they send me on a sunsetting beach, or in a forest, or in beautiful fields at sunset, you're going to be in the studio. But you know what? I think possibly there may be the option that, as Calvin said, if the customer wants to pay and they want to get that sort of image, yeah, I'll create that image here in the studio, light it appropriately, and then blend it with AI into that. If they're going to pay, that's it. It's not going to go in for a photo competition. So from that side of things, forget it. But if it's going to satisfy the needs of my client, hey, why not?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So we're just in the last few minutes. So I'm going to ask you, all four of you, to just respond to a question that again has come in from the audience. So it's just a brief response to you, and then I'll do a very quick wrap up. And the question is, when taken in the round, is AI a positive development for photography/art? Brooke, if I can come to you first.
Yeah, I think that any new way that we can express ourselves is positive overall. I think that I'm not looking at it from a financial point of view or from a copyright point of view. And so I don't mean to speak about that specifically, but I think that self-expression is vital, especially when we look at mental health, and especially when we look at mental health among youth. And I'm really excited about the possibilities that this creates. So I think overall positive for art. I don't know about photography specifically, but yeah, I'd say overall.
Corrine, if I can come to you next.
I think it has both its positive and negatives. Positive, as I said, would be the workflow. That has been amazing for me. And to get an inspiration as well. I've used AI to get some sort of inspiration. Negatives, like for me, it's just how much of other people's work's being used and where is that going forward.
And Calvin, again, briefly, positive or negative?
I think it's a tool. Depends how you use it, and we are in a very, very early stage, right? Listen, we only had mobile phones for 15, 16 years, and we think like it's a blink of, it's a revolution. We think like human evolution. Okay, so we think like we know it all, and this is only happens for like like last year or two. So I think we need to give a bit of a time. Everyone's just like have a look, experiment, and see what is. And it's a tool. Obviously, use it for your advantage and do a little bit of research and development, and you'll find out. And what if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If not, I'm sure there's a version will come in future that might fit you.
Yeah. Panikos, again, just briefly, positive or negative?
I think positive. I think in the future we're going to be seeing degree courses on AI. Children will be doing it at school. It's going to completely transform the way that we can create imagery. But I still maintain that there's a difference between photography and AI generated photorealistic imagery. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if other people agree with it, but that's how I see it. And I think there is a negative. I do think in the same way as ChatGPT has impacted copywriters, I think AI generated imagery is going to hit commercial photography in a big way, and models possibly.
Yep. Okay, I think that pretty much brings us up to time. So there's two things I need to do now. Firstly, to say that the Royal Photographic Society has a couple of events coming up in the autumn, which I think will be really interesting to our audience. Firstly, there's a conference taking place in early October. And secondly, picking up on something that was said earlier, our digital imaging group is hosting the Sony award winner who handed his prize back, and his name's just slipped my head, but we're hosting him as a speaker at the RPS. So go to rps.org/AI. I'd like to thank Brooke, Corrine, Calvin and Panikos for your insights, your thoughts, and just for talking about a whole area of photography and art that we're still in those early stages of, as we've heard. There's a whole raft of questions that we had from our audience around everything from the circularity of machine learning, copyright rights, how we identify AI, and raw files that we haven't been able to touch on tonight. And I'll ask for the questions and perhaps try and get some responses back to the audience. So thank you to the audience for staying with us this evening and for participating in this call. Thank you to our speakers. And just a reminder, this has been hosted has been put together by the Photography Show, which takes place in March of next year at the NEC in Birmingham. So do come along to the show, and thank you to Hazel and the Photography Show for arranging this conversation. I'm sure we're going to be doing more of them in the future. It's early stages and there's so much more to say, and obviously AI is going to evolve over the next week, month and years. So thank you everyone, and thank you for your participation.